So, despite the ruling of the Presidential Election Petitions Tribunal in favor of Bola Ahmed Tinubu and the fact that he's been effectively recognized as the president of Nigeria by the international community, there are still many who insist that the election that brought him to office did not reflect the popular will and are battling it all the way to the Supreme Court. And today we've seen both the PDP and the Labour Party filing their appeals there. So when they get to the Supreme Court, how will the justices, these venerable Solomons, react to the case before them? How thorough will their grasp of detail be? How patient their pursuit of facts and how passionate their belief in justice? Can the public believe that those justices, settled in their centre chairs and peering down from on high, will be like cricket umpires, impartial, fair and just? Can their sole interest in the proceedings be the presentation of evidence that might suggest that a miscarriage of justice took place at the tribunal? And given that the petitioners will be in front of a panel of justices and not a lay person's jury, their lordships' decision will likely be based not on reasonable doubt, but on far more demanding criteria before they can consider overturning the tribunal's ruling and declaring a miscarriage of justice. Quite a tall order then, isn't it? Well, to help us consider all those points, I'm joined now from our studios in London by the president and founder of ANAP Foundation, Atedo Peterside CON, who's also founder of Stanbic IBTC Bank. Mr. Peterside, always a pleasure and an honor to have you on the program. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Hi, Charles. My pleasure.
Well, thanks again. Let's start with your rather persistent tweets about the 2023 presidential election. Why are you still tweeting about that when many Nigerians, and indeed many in the international community and the world stage, have accepted Bola Ahmed Tinubu as Nigeria's president? Is there much unfinished business still?
Well, I think the process will continue to the Supreme Court, like you just said yourself. And I think it's a good thing that both Atiku and Obi are going to the Supreme Court. My biggest interest there is not whether they get whatever they're looking for, as much as to ensure that damage is not done to the whole system. The whole purpose of this Electoral Act, which was a much improved Electoral Act, I actually said it on TV, that it was one of the legacies of President Buhari, was that it was supposed to deliver an improved environment for us to carry out elections transparently, lower the burden of proof for those filing petitions, and also even to make the information available to the whole world via INEX IREV. So any things that threaten all those gains, I think they should be elevated all the way to Supreme Court and let Supreme Court tell us which elements of the Electoral Act are still valid, which ones are not, or indeed has the whole act been repealed.
Well, I mean, that process that you talk about has obviously started. It actually began at the Presidential Elections Petitions Court, where it has concluded. Is there anything that was particularly significant or that you saw that stood out for you from the PDP's Atiku Abubakar or the Labour Party's Peter Obi's submissions at that Presidential Election Petitions Tribunal?
Yes, I'm talking now as an economist. We spent, I think, over 350 billion to create new instruments like INEC IREV, which were supposed to put things beyond doubt. The Osun election, everything was done almost correctly, governorship election. It was the last election before the presidential. By 6 p.m., many of us had been on INEX IREV. We knew the results. For the presidency, there was talk about a glitch. But guess what? 6 months late, more than 6 months later, as of today, they have still not uploaded all the polling unit results. You turn to some pages, you see things like access denied. You turn to the next page, you see a completely blurred image. So if we could get it right for Osun, what stopped INEC from getting it right for where it matters most, the presidency?
Yes, I expect...
So PDP came out with some claims. PDP came out with some claims that, quite frankly, shows that the whole system was broken down. According to INEC, PDP won 12 states. PDP put out a statement, or at least in their submission, claiming that they actually came first in 21 states. So they listed an extra 9 states. How is that possible in an environment where everything is meant to be available for us all to examine? I can give you a clue. If so many results were altered, then, and some of us pointed out before that the pattern of the alterations was deducting votes from Labour and adding to APC. That's from INEC's IREV. I didn't create the IREV, but you could see there. So obviously what PDP is talking about is that by the time they returned some of those votes to the correct place, they think that APC gained too much, Labour Party lost too much, and they, PDP, actually finished up in a particular position. Should we be having these kinds of arguments in 2023 about the national election after spending over 300 billion naira? And something is missing because INEC still will not upload all the information till today.
Well, I suppose that's a legitimate question, but I mean, the fact is that that election has taken place. People have gone to the Presidential Elections Tribunal and have now gone to the Supreme Court. But on that tribunal level, what's your overall take on its judgment? What's your assessment of how it handled the case?
See, I'm particularly worried about pronouncements they made, which appear to have taken us back to square one. I said earlier that the Electoral Act was supposed to improve and get us nearer free and fair elections. If all the major gains from the Electoral Act, the judges have made pronouncements almost reversing or wiping them out, then it's important that Supreme Court decides beyond Atiku and Obi. We have elections coming, governorship in Imo. We have elections coming in Edo. We have elections coming in Bayelsa. It's important we know whether INEC is going to conduct these elections the way they handled the elections for Osun, or are they going to repeat this nonsense they did in the presidential election, claiming a glitch and hiding results and posting blurred images and all sorts. It also creates a problem for a winner in terms of legitimacy. What are we hiding 6 months after an election? So I'm concerned more about what it portends for the future and for future elections. Because if we wipe away all the gains, then we can as well ask INEC and DSS and whoever to just tell us who they want to announce as a winner. Because if you make the burden of proof so high for those who have been wounded by the system, then people will resort to self-help. If you are completely silent and ignore voter suppression, then everybody in Edo and Bayelsa and Imo will be thinking about voter suppression.
Right. Well, right. You mentioned the Supreme Court, Mr. Peterside. Let's turn to the Supreme Court in a circumscribed way, of course. If the case is going to be opening there soon, we have to be circumspect. What are the main issues that you see or you believe should be before the court in deciding this seminal case?
No, I think I'm concerned about, like I said earlier, things that concern our future. Can INEC be held accountable at all? If yes, how? Are we placing too high a burden of proof on every petitioner? Who is an acceptable expert witness? Does party membership disqualify a witness? We're talking about, is INEC empowered to make rules, issue press releases, tell us this is what they're going to do, and do the exact opposite? If that is the case, then for the next election, is there any point in INEC bringing out a press release? Have election petitions become impossible, really, because of this 21-day witness oath rule that is being bandied around? Does proving election infractions require the impossible task of calling witnesses from each polling unit in a presidential election? I could go on and on. Can subpoena witnesses refuse to obey court orders and go scot-free? Why would INEC and umpire refuse to bring out certified true copies, certified true copies as demanded? What are they hiding exactly? Should they go scot-free?
Well, I don't mean to interrupt you there. I don't mean to interrupt you, Mr. Peterside, but I mean that's quite a laundry list of points you've raised there. I mean, do you trust the Supreme Court? I'm wondering how feasible the PDP and the Labour Party's appeal case to the Supreme Court will be, and how optimistic you are that the points you raised will gain new wind at the Supreme Court.
I am trusting that the Supreme Court understands that they should not force every Nigerian to resort to self-help in future elections. Therefore, they must address some issues. Is there now a permanent ban on use of technology in future Nigerian elections? They should tell us. Is it true that there are no more candidate qualification issues post-nomination by a political party? Do we not require complete clarity on what is a pre-election matter versus a post-election matter? Do we have that clarity now? Will Supreme Court help us out there? Is the 2022 Electoral Act now effectively repealed? Should we disregard all future INEC press statements if their press statements have no meaning? What does that do to INEC? Then, I mentioned earlier certified true copies. If an umpire cannot bring out a certified true copy of his own work, what is he there for? Where it is proven that INEC staff falsified a polling unit results before uploading same on IREV, should there be any consequence for this criminal action? Above all, have we truly set the stage for free and fair elections in the forthcoming governorship elections? Or is everybody going to go and look for thugs to suppress voters? And then will INEC in Bayelsa, Imo, and Edo hold back the results? They would upload them, and they spend the whole night changing them. If that is the case, they can as well just tell us who is the winner now.
Yes, well, just looking at the
Supreme Court.
Right, just looking at the points you raised, quite numerous. Overall, would you say that depending on how thorough the Supreme Court justices are and how impartial, fair and just they are, that the PDP and the Labour Party may still have enough stones in their pouch to slay Goliath? Not forgetting, of course, that David only needed one stone to do that, because certainly on the tribunal level, it doesn't seem like they have a leg to stand on.
Well, I don't want to go into trying to second guess the Supreme Court judges, but all I'm trying to point out is that I hope they will look at the big picture. I'm concerned equally about the future and what this portends for us. What we do, what Supreme Court pronounces on some of these points I've raised, helps to define us as a people. The implications go beyond elections. If people get the impression that Nigeria is not a country where you can do business and rely on judges to clearly interpret every single statute, then they will vote with their feet. So there are broader issues. I'm looking at the big picture. We don't want Supreme Court judges to be relying on all sorts of minor technicalities to dodge the big issues. Everybody's waiting for those big issues, and Supreme Court should boldly pronounce on them, so we know how to handle ourselves in future.
Well, you talked there about the potential for investment. Let me get you to wear your sort of business hat. You are, of course, a prominent investment banker and founder of a major bank, Stanbic IBTC. Do you think the government of President Tinubu is going about attracting international investors the right way? Do you think they'll succeed in that quest, given the things that you've talked about?
Yeah, you see, that's what I'm happy you asked the question, because it's a complex whole. Investors come to a place where they're confident. It's not just about the potential of getting a return. Who wants to invest in a place if you believe there's no law and order? Who wants to invest in a place if you believe that some judges can just wipe you out with the wrong interpretation of your case? So this is a complex whole. And I think that the president himself, Tinubu, should be as concerned as I am to tell INEC, for goodness sake, can you post all these results you promised? Your glitch is over. Why do you want to win an election and you'll be hiding the detailed results up till now? If I passed an exam, I would gladly have them broadcast the results, paste it for the whole world to see, polling unit by polling unit. So the point I'm making is that you cannot just tell the whole world that, oh, come to Nigeria, come and make investments. Initially, they'll wait and see. And the range of you are to respect the rule of law. How good is your judiciary? Those things matter.
Yes, well, I mean, let me turn to one prominent person by way of a return to the issue of the elections. One prominent person who's seen by many as a moral authority in Nigeria and beyond. That's the Nobel laureate Wole Soyinka, who seems to have come out in support of President Tinubu, insisting that the Labour Party leadership is trying to insist that Peter Obi won the election and are lying and are being deceitful in that process. I mean, what's your take on that?
Okay, first I think let me make it very clear. I have tremendous respect for Wole Soyinka. I was a young graduate in year one when I read the first book. I think that it was the first of his books that I read. The man died. So I'm never going to stay in this studio and disrespect Wole Soyinka. But I will make a serious comment, because this has wide implications. First of all, let's make a distinction between Labour Party and the obedient movement. I've said before that for every one Labour Party member, there are probably anything from 9 to 99 obedients. Wole Soyinka most times is talking about Labour Party sometimes, talking about obedience sometimes. The two are not the same. Perhaps almost everybody in Labour Party is obedient, but there are many people who are obedient who are not in Labour Party. And I think the aspect of his commentary that worries me a little is the one that does not seem to recognize that sometimes he is talking about victims. I'm talking about young people. And I know Wole Soyinka well. I read everything about him because he's one of my heroes. I just want to ask a question. You give me the answer, Charles. When Wole Soyinka was 25, from what you know of him, if he came out to vote in an election and thugs held him back and said, you cannot vote because you're Yoruba, we're going to allow only Igbos and Hausas to vote, how would he have reacted? So let's be very careful. So what the people is addressing are people who were victims to voter suppression. the people who watched policemen looking when thugs assaulted them, they were barred from voting. So I'm just saying that let's recognize the fact that some of them have behaved even better than he might have done at that age. So I don't want to take sides in faulting young people or trying to criticize Wale Soyinka, who is my idol. I'm just saying that, look, sometimes let us understand that when you're addressing a group, you have to be very careful, because there are different components of that group, including people who are traumatized, people who were injured, indeed some who were killed. So let's be careful. It's like when people discuss Nigerians, sometimes it's better to narrow down and say, who are you addressing? I suspect he's addressing the very vocal elements, some obedience who are particularly vociferous on social media. There could be a tiny subset. So we were looking for healing. We're not trying to divide the nation more.
Right. Well, we've got about a minute and a half left for this chat, sadly. I'm very curious to know, Mr. Peterside, what keeps you going through all this? Because for many others, I mean, the thrill of the chase has been steadily wearing off, and boredom with the protest against the official result of the presidential election is setting in.
No, what keeps me going is the quest for good governance. My prayer has been for good governance for my country. And if we attain good governance, I will retire. And I hope that President Tinubu would build on what Buhari did in the area of electoral reform. Because we were on the same side before on things like June 12th. We were fighting for justice. Justice for me is the same everywhere. What I want is good treatment, equal treatment for people in a similar situation. We want to make sure that people's rights are not oppressed. These are important things. They're bigger issues. And Nigeria must make some positive strides there. And if we do, I'll stop talking.
Well, hopefully not, because life is always about obstacles, isn't it? But I want to thank you very much indeed. It's always a great pleasure talking with you and getting the benefit of your analysis. Atedo Peterside, CON, is the president and founder of ANAP Foundation and also founder of Stanbic IBTC Bank. He was talking to me there from our studios in London.